Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, you have the first vlog after the nominees have been released and a whole lot of controversy stirred up. For the very first time, one of my videos has gotten over 1,000 views. That's wow. For me, a little intimidating. So I don't know how many of those people who viewed that video are going to stick around. I hope you will. I hope you enjoy my takes. Not fancy editing. We'll put up with that. Every single book that I'm going to read for the rest of the next section of vlogs are going to be nominees. And because I got rid of the middle grade section, still annoyed by that, I've switched to the memoir section. And I was realizing on the way home tonight that ranking them is going to be difficult because I don't rate memoirs. So I'm gonna have to figure out something to do about that. But because my two primary categories are adult fantasy and young adult fantasy, I can still rate and rank those, and I'm gonna do those. Since I last updated a vlog, I have completed 3 books, but I'm going to talk about only 2. I am starting this vlog on Tuesday. Monday, I didn't feel like starting, and then the nominees were released, and I recorded the video and edited and dealt with all of that yesterday. Now, I will mention, the one book that I read that I am not going to talk about, I've mentioned it briefly before. It is published by Wednesday Books, which is an imprint of St. Martin's Press, and I am not reviewing any of those books. I have to make sure, I have to check some of the other books to make sure to see if any of them are any of those imprints because of the things I explained in the last week. And I'm really bummed that I'm not going to be reviewing that book because I have a lot to say about it, and I think it's a tragedy what's happening, and I'm just gonna leave it there because I really want to talk about it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stand in solidarity, and I'm gonna move on to the books that I have finished and can talk about. And the first of those, both of these are audiobooks. I'm reading another one physically. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go grab that. Okay, so let's talk about the one that I finished. The one that I finished is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I see what a lot of people were saying when this came out because they had to wait so long. They had to wait 3 years for the sequel. It's not that I didn't enjoy this book. I really did. And that still surprises me because this series I would not have picked up otherwise if this book had not been on the list. But there was something missing. And for a while, as I was reading it, after I finished it, just trying to figure out what is missing. Why am I not necessarily connecting with this story the same way that I did with Ninth House? And I think a big part of that is the setup of the book. Ninth House has a split timeline with a now current timeline and a then, and you have different point of view narrator characters for both of those timelines. All of those characters appear. This one has a teeny bit of that, and then it just sort of goes away because it jumps back only about a month. She made some choices in the plot structure as well. I really enjoyed the combination of dark academia and fantasy and mystery that you had in Ninth House. And you get a little bit of this. There are some mysterious deaths at the beginning of the book that sort of kicks it off, but it's not mystery in the same way that Ninth House is. It goes way more into the paranormal, several trips to literal hell in this book. Some of the things that she does to some of the characters, like Darlington's character, I'm not 100% sure about. And I don't think it really worked. Like, I'm engaged, I like the characters, but this felt almost like a different genre than Ninth House. At the very least, a different genre blend than Ninth House was, because Ninth House is not any one particular genre. Like I said, it's that mix of dark academia and fantasy and mystery. This one leaned way into the fantasy, the paranormal aspects of it, and had a touch of the academia. She barely goes to class in this one. So again, I still haven't put it through Cawpile, through my rating system. I think Ninth House might squeak out a 4.5, but it's probably a very high 4. I don't think this one's going to drop down to a 3.5 because I did still enjoy it. It's going to be somewhere in there, either a very high 3.5 or a low 4. So lower than Ninth House, but still a good book. And now that I'm thinking about it, I haven't actually finished 3 books. I've finished 2, talked about 1, and I'm going to finish another one, hopefully 2 more tonight, because I'm trying to read a minimum of a book off the list a day, a book and a half. If I can finish 2, that'd be great. Yes, I read a lot. I read a lot. Is it a problem? Sometimes. Right now, no. The next book that I'm reading, that I'm going to cross off the adult fantasy list, so this is another one off the adult fantasy list, is Victory City by Salman Rushdie. This is the one that really surprised me to see on the list. I've never heard of it before. This is actually my first Salman Rushdie book. I've had the one that he's known about that I can't think of the name of. I've had that on my TBR off and on. I don't think I'm ever going to go back and read it. I'm about 75% of the way through this audiobook, and I don't hate it. I also don't really love it or gel with it. I see why they put it into the fantasy category. It's the catch-all for anything with a little bit of paranormal, just like sci-fi on those awards. It's a catch-all for anything that it has a little bit of science in it. This, I think I would put in the same subcategory as the Greek myth retellings, because there's a little bit of the not normal, of the supernatural in this, and I think that's what makes it why they put it in there. In this is basically a very broad expanse of time acting as it's a, what is the word that I want for it? It's like, it's rediscovered text chronicling this history, this epic of a time around the 1400s, 1500s somewhere in India. And it has a main character. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name because I'm listening to the audiobook on a faster speed and I can't get a good grasp on how it's pronounced. One main character so far, she has lived an exceptionally long time, but part of the fantasy part is she was able, through the powers of a goddess at the age of like 9 or so, to start speaking and creating with her words this entire city and civilization and everything, including the people that went into it. And it's the story that goes along with it. Generational stories tend not to be my favorite, and to have one that is this broad, it's not really clicking with me, and I figured that it wouldn't, but it's not bad. It's compelling, it's intriguing, and I'm captured enough by what's being said and told to pay attention to the story. There are so many people mentioned though, I couldn't tell you half of the different people that existed. It's very much a sprawling fairy tale type story, epic. Is this gonna make the second round? I highly doubt it. I will hopefully finish that tomorrow. This is a much longer opening because I have so many books to talk about. And the one that I'm reading physically, this is not the normal cover, this is the, I think, Fairy Loot cover of Threads That Bind by Kika Hatsapulu. And this one is really intriguing me. So this almost is dystopian. And it's almost sci-fi, but it's fantasy. It's an almost completely new fantasy world, but I think it's based on our world just in the far future after some cataclysm happened. I think it's our world after like the moon split into 3, and obviously that is going to affect tides and things like that. And a lot of these areas, especially where she lives, like the lower class areas, are very flooded. That has significantly affected how people are living and able to get around and etc. But there's also this class of, I think they call them Otherborn, that are descended from different Greek, not necessarily the Greek gods, but different Greek deities or entities. And I always get them mixed up, the Furies and the Fates. The ones that deal with the threads I think it's the Fates. They always come in threes. So if anyone has powers over these threads, it's a group of 3 sisters. So she is the youngest of 3 sisters, and she is the cutter. That is her job. One, I think, creates it. One is able to extend it or shorten it, and then she's the one that can cut it. And she's the youngest of the 3. And I'm really intrigued by it. There's stuff setting up. This is not typical because it has tropes, it has bits of everything. It has a little bit of Greek mythology, but it's set in an almost, but not really, not completely futuristic world. So I'm hoping to maybe complete this tonight. I don't think I will. I will probably also finish this one tomorrow. So there is my opening clip of, I guess this is vlog number 3, but from here on out, until I read all of them, all of the books are going to be books for off one of the lists. Okay, another hopefully quicker update. I have indeed finished the book I was talking about yesterday, Victory City by Salman Rushdie, and my thoughts really haven't changed. It was basically the story of this one kingdom, and yes, there were some magical elements to it, and I don't really think that you could have classified it in general fiction, but it's not really fantasy, and it's the kind of book that doesn't really have a genre to put it in. So I understand why they put it in fantasy, and it wasn't a bad book. I just never engaged with it because you're never with the characters long enough for it to engage in any sort of way. So I finished that one, and I should start putting these through Copile sooner to get my ratings, but that's probably going to be a 3.5 because it's not average on the bad side. It's average slightly on the good side because it is structurally well written. I don't think it's going to make it through to the next round. I'm not going to put it in my top 10. I'm not going to do my rankings for this until later, maybe before the next round, but I'm not 100% certain about that because I don't know how many I'll get through before that round ends, but I do have Thanksgiving break for that. All right, I'm getting sidetracked. I have read an entire other book since then. I do listen to things on a fairly fast speed, and I've been trying to have more audiobook listening time. I don't have a physical copy of this. A lot of these, if I could get a physical copy of, I'm trying to, but some of them I really can't. The wait list is too long or my library doesn't have it. But I do have, I got 2 more library subscriptions, the ones that you can pay for being like out of state. So I have now 4 libraries that I can check out books from. But one of those that I read is These Infinite Threads, and that is book 2 in the This Woven Kingdom series. I read This Woven Kingdom, I think, earlier this year. I actually can't remember exactly when I read it. It might have been last year. And I'm leaning towards last year because the details on that book are fuzzy. I remembered some things, but then as the story started to unfold in the second book, I remembered more of it. I didn't ever feel deprived for not having reread the first book right before that. This is classic middle book syndrome. I think originally this was supposed to be a duology, but now it's going to be a trilogy. And I don't know why she made it a trilogy because this book really did not need to exist. But if it did, it could have been condensed and tacked on either, probably not to the first one because that was a cliffhanger, but to the next one and for the duology. All that this book did was add in another love interest, which set up yet another YA fantasy or book love triangle. I don't like love triangles. Eventually get to the point where you're getting a group together in the other perspective to go on a quest. It's literally all it did. And even as she was trying to build up this secondary love interest for the female main character, I just went, how are we supposed to believe that she's falling in love with him? Is it just because he's tortured? Is it just because, you know, he's going through XYZ? It's a toxic relationship. When he's talking about things, it's like he's depending entirely on her for every bit of, he's like, I've been dreaming about you for months. You need to be with me. No, that's creepy, sir. I think that I rated This Woven Kingdom 4 stars. So yet again, I have another what I think will be a 3.5 stars, which is unfortunate. And then I go into the next audiobook that I'm reading. Again, I don't have this one physically, and it's one of the Greek myth retellings that are on the fantasy list, and that is Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. Most of these, or a lot of these Greek myth retellings, just expand on the narration portion of actual myths. And a lot of them don't even focus on just one myth. They throw in all sorts of other myths just to be like, look, I know my Greek mythology. And what I liked about Ariadne and Atalanta by Jennifer Saint, Atalanta on this year's list, is that she didn't do that. She didn't just throw in every bit of Greek mythology that she could. When it was appropriate, she talked about it. A lot of these myths overlap. This one, however, I almost said that it's a hot mess. It's not. It's well written. However, it basically is like those mythology books that I can picture the book. And it was one of those generic compilation mythology books, but it's very well known. And I loved it. I read it as a kid, read it lots of times. Yes, that's what got me into Greek mythology, not, excuse me, Percy Jackson. It basically reads like that mythology book, only with narration and dialogue and some funny humor. It's supposed to be Stone Blind, the story of Medusa. Yet we had this whole thread going on for like the first quarter about like Zeus being miserable and having this massive headache and it turning into Athena being born. And I guess that's tying in because Medusa was violated in Athena's temple by Poseidon, and that's why Athena takes revenge on Medusa. But did we need all of that? No. And there are lots of narrator changes, and they don't always tell you who's narrating it. There's this whole section because, of course, a lot of this narrative is talking about Perseus. There's this whole section where it's a rant against Perseus right after he accepts this challenge to go get the head of a Gorgon. And I have no idea who was supposed to have narrated that portion. It's not clear at all. The audiobook narrator did a fantastic job with it. You could tell that whoever was supposed to be narrating that was so righteously angry on Medusa's behalf. But I have no idea who that was supposed to be. So this definitely is not going to be my favorite of the 3 Greek myth retellings on this list. Speaking of Greek myth retellings, in just a little bit, I'm hopefully going to finish this book. Now, I say Greek myth retellings. This is not a Greek myth retelling. This is a carry-on, an extension with allusions, lots of allusions to Greek mythology, and I am loving this. When I went to bed last night, I was thinking that this book reminded me of something else. I have not figured out what that something else is, which is one of those bothersome things, you know, it's in the corner of your mind, you're like, oh, it's nagging at you. But this is very gritty. It's not super dark, but it's definitely gritty. And it's quite urban. And urban fantasy is not necessarily my favorite, but I love the world that is set up in here. And it's definitely supposed to be our world just after an unnamed cataclysm that split the moons and there was flooding and etc. I really like how the character interactions are developing, how Io, the main character, is learning and growing as a character, how she's interacting with her 2 different sisters, what she's learning, and how she's controlling the different threads. This is how you do allusions to and use of Greek mythology. Stop retelling the same stories over and over and over again. We get it. So hopefully I will finish this tonight, and the next book that I pick up physically, I don't know what that's going to be. I'm probably going to use a random number generator. I've got the stacks here. You can see Fragile Threads of Power on the top. I have 3 stacks, young adult, and then the 2 memoirs that I have are behind me. So I don't know what I'm going to get to next, but hopefully I'll be able to keep up at least 1.5 books if not 2 books per day. Okay, I'm back with another long clip to finish up this week's vlog, although it's not really a full week because I didn't start this until Wednesday. But this is every single book that I've read this in this vlog is for the Goodreads Choice Awards. As I'm looking here, that is a total of 6 since Wednesday. Am I reading a lot of books right now? Yes. Do I have a lot to say? Yes. Should I have updated every single day? No, you're getting 3 clips. That's how the schedule works out. I spent most of Friday after work recording my project launch video, editing, and getting that up so it could go up Saturday when I was not at home because I was running a half marathon. And so then Saturday I just wanted to read, well, recover from the half, which was a lot more difficult than I expected, and read. So I didn't record either Friday or Saturday. So now it is Sunday. I'm wrapping this up. I have finished a book this morning. I had only like 7% of it left, so I'm counting it. And then as soon as I finish this, I'm going to intro the next clips, start the next week's reading. But let's talk a little bit about the books that I have finished because, so I mentioned that I had finished this one as of the last clip, that I was almost done with this one, I believe, and that I was in the middle of this one. Since there are 3 other books that I have to talk about, so I'm going to try to be quick. All right, Stone Blind. Later on in the book, it gets revealed who that other narrator was, and I feel like that change, once you figure that out, it taints the view of a character, that same character who had been present earlier in the book. And I'm not going to say because like that, I think that's part of the reveal, but just that narrator character just became so bitter and vindictive and was not looking at things with any sort of objectivity. But once again, some of the same things hold true about this book that I mentioned before. This is not much of a retelling. This is basically narratively expanding on already existing myths. There's not much told here that's not already in the myths. There's a different focus. It's mainly on the female characters, but other than that, there's not really much new about this. So I think out of the 3 Greek myth retellings, this is going to be towards the bottom. Okay, I had to replace their battery real quick if the angle changed. Next, I finished up Threads That Bind, and this was an unexpected surprise hit for me. Basically, out of all of these YA books, as of right now, it's towards the front in the running. It'll definitely be ranked in my top 10. So again, both of these are related to Greek myths. This is basically a straight retelling. This is playing on as if these myths have kept going into modern / dystopian days. And I really like the complexity of all of the different character workings throughout this book. Some of the reveals that happen with her sister and who might be at fault for various things, and even what some secondary characters become. There is character growth in a lot of these different characters, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the second half of this book. Then we come to the one that I read completely in between the last update and this one, and that is a book on the memoir list, the only memoir that I've read this week at least, and that is Beth Moore's All My Knotted Up Life. Earlier this year, my mom had found this book, checked it out, and read it, and had actually shared certain bits of it with me. And obviously, my mom is much more involved in and knows a lot more of figures and stuff about this because of her job working as the assistant to the teaching pastor at our church. Beth Moore had started to come on my radar for some of the stuff that she talks about in here and some of the blowback that she got in response to a public, I think it was a Twitter post or maybe Instagram, I don't remember which social media, in response to the Access Hollywood tape that came out in 2016. She had already set up in here where she had stuff. She was a victim of SA herself. She was basically just coming out and saying, this is wrong. As a Christian, I cannot support this. and I cannot condone this, and I'm not going to do anything to do that. Obviously, speaking out against the then candidate for president. And so she received such vitriolic lashback because of this stance. And she ended up leaving the Southern Baptist Church, which she had grown up all her entire life in, because of how they responded. And so many people looked at her, and basically by saying this, they discounted her own trauma and said, but think about the babies. And that's how so many Christians have justified this. And so I knew that part. My mom had found that on the audiobook when she was listening to it and played it for me. And I also listened to this as an audiobook, and Beth Moore talks about like her different accent. Like, she is very Southern, grew up in Arkansas, ended up in Texas, and that's where she lives. And her accent, not necessarily my favorite, but I do like the authenticity because she herself narrates this. One of the interesting things to me in how I was listening to this is a part of me was separated from it because I'm thinking about all of the other people who might be picking this book up because it's on the list. And if they don't have any connection whatsoever to the church, to Christianity, and what they are going to think because of how so many Christians have not acted like Christ-like, like the name is supposed to mean, and what a bitter taste that has left in the mouths of so many people. And so I was seeing a lot of it through that filter, through my own struggles with that whole response and how people have been responding. But I really appreciated the way that she told her story, and she laid it out, and she was very honest and transparent in her own struggles, both with her childhood, in her marriage, with her husband's mental health struggles, with his actual health scare because of a freak fishing accident. Like, his finger got cut on a line and he got this rare bacteria infection. And then the vitriol that was directed against her for standing up and speaking out and saying, you know, this sort of behavior is wrong. And so, again, I don't think I'm going to, with this project, release any sort of ranking when it comes to these books, but I do want to make my way through these books, and I might just talk about, you know, why I think certain books should be in certain parts of, you know, like the long list, making the finalists, the winner, etc. But in the memoir category, it's basically going to be popularity. It's going to come down to the celebrities who are on the list: Prince Harry, Britney Spears, Elliot Page. So it's going to be one of those three. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Britney Spears. Next we come to the book that I read physically, and I read it basically in one day. I read a bit of it Friday, I'd say about a third, a little under a third, and then finished it up yesterday, and that is The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. I have yet to come across an Adrienne Young book that I have not liked. There's one that was just kind of mid for me. It was like, fine, why did this need to be written? But the rest I have absolutely loved. And I think this is above the mid, but not an absolutely love. I really enjoyed this book. And so this is dealing with the idea of, so this girl she's in her mid-30s, successive generations of her family, the women in her family, have basically struggled with losing their mind, this really odd sort of dementia, and she knows that she's going to come up next. It's going to happen to her. She's been experiencing these symptoms, but it turns out that it's part of that, and it is affecting their minds, but it has a different cause, and it's rooted in the idea of, well, you know what, I'm not going to say. It has a different cause, and the way that it plays out, and her own dealing with different circumstances in what this other life, basically, it really is an unmaking of what she knew of as her life at the start of this book. When the book starts, she is mourning the loss of her grandmother, who she spent the past few years taking care of. And as her grandmother, you know, descended into more and more of the dementia-like symptoms. I will say that I could predict just about every major plot beat in here, and I didn't mind. It's one of those things where sometimes if you can predict what's going to happen, it's really annoying because you're like, yeah, I already knew that was going to happen. But there are certain authors that can take a story where you understand what is happening, the different twists, the different reasoning behind, so that even when it's revealed, you're like, yes, it feels affirming instead of annoying. The reason that they can quote unquote get away with that, or that it works for them, is the writing and the atmosphere and how that narrative makes you feel. I loved just getting to wrap myself in my comfortable blanket and settle in on the, in the afternoon and finish this book. It just was a very heartwarming read. And for that, I enjoyed it. Do I think it's going to make it out of the first round? No, I don't think it is. Is it? I actually think this is more in the quote unquote fantasy genre than Spells for Forgetting, even though it has the word spells in it and there's more quote unquote witchcraft in that. Spells for Forgetting, it's sort of in the same area, but this has very different vibes. And I really like what she did here. And if she continues to write books like this and never goes back to young adult or fantasy, that's totally fine with me. I really enjoyed this. And lastly, the book that I finished just prior to starting this, because I had only 7% left, is Song of Silver, Flame Like Night. Technically, this is my Buzzwordathon book for December, but it was on the list. I had the audiobook, so I went ahead and read it. This is a gorgeous edition. I think this was the January, is it Illumicrate? Yes, January Illumicrate book, or December. It was very early on in the year, so I've had it on my shelf for quite a while. What I said about The Unmaking of June Farrow, how I could predict all of the different plot beats, pretty much the same here. I don't mean necessarily that I was trying to predict them. It's just that when it comes to fantasy and certain types of fantasy, there are certain tropes that you inevitably see, certain plot beats that you see in just about every young adult fantasy. They're all present in here. I think they're done well. I loved the exploration of the magic. It's a very new magic system, but I just feel a little bit frustrated. Not that I didn't like the book. I think I will definitely hold on to this book. I think it was well written. I just don't think, besides the magic system, that it did anything new in the genre. Does it necessarily have to do anything new? No. But when it falls exactly like you think it's going to, and you can almost predict what's going to come next, like, what's the difference? I don't know. I could predict what was going to come next in that one, and I still really enjoyed it. My enjoyment level on this one was a little bit less. I still really enjoyed it. I thought that the way that the magic played out was really good, and I really enjoyed that. I don't think there was that same bit with the writing that made it as captivating and made it so that the plot beats were just the thing, the structure that the narrative was built around, and that the narrative itself was the thing that shone, which is this one. I think that there was more weight on the narrative itself in this book rather than the atmosphere, and I think that may be the difference. I don't know. I'm just speculating. I'm just thinking about it. This probably is going to get a very low 4 stars. It might get a 3.5. If it got a 3.5, it'd be a very high 3.5. So I'll definitely be keeping this in my collection. I don't know if I'm going to put it in my top 10 or not. I was speculating whether I would do a ranking ahead of time. I think I am going to make a top 10 prediction prior to the second round, the finalists being published, finalized. I don't know what word I wanted there. But when I react to the top 10, I think I will start it by saying these are the books that I think are going to be in the top 10. Out of the books that I've read, I think these are going to be my top 10. That's just what I'm thinking about. What I have here are just the books that I read since the beginning of this vlog. In the first specifically dedicated week of my Goodreads Choice Awards project, where I'm attempting to read through 3 complete categories, I have read 6 books. And that just included let's see, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah, 4 days. I think if I keep up this pace, I might be able to do it. But that's all going to depend on getting access to audiobooks and etc. So there you go. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.